So this is very exciting. In the studio with me right now is Josh Kornbluth, somebody I've known for a long time. Josh is... Now, we have to get this out of the way. Are you a monologuist or a monologist?
I go with monologuist,
yeah.
Colin, because it makes me feel more powerful, like a logger, you know?
Yeah.
Like I fell the narrative.
Right. And monologist seems like a specialist, a medical specialist. Like,
yes.
I've got some...
I just came back from the monologist, and I'm just kind of sore. I can't really sit down.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
He said I had sand in my monologue.
Yeah.
Vacuumed it all out. All right. So he's a... now I forget which one. Monologuist, an author, an actor, writes a Substack called But Not Enough About Me. Excitingly, well, there are many things that are exciting, actually, about Josh and otherwise. He will be appearing at Real Artways in Hartford this weekend performing his new monologue, Citizen Brain, and tickets and more information will be available is available at realartways.org. And we haven't seen each other in a long time, but we do go quite a ways back to I had a whole other radio career going, and then you wrecked it, and I had to go into public radio. So
I'm just really sorry. My meds were off in those days. Yeah,
you crashed me. So I want to begin by talking about the new monologue. First of all, this is one that kind of has gestated over a long period of time.
Yes,
and I believe was initially performed, as so many things were, including sex acts, on Zoom.
Yes, absolutely. And my meds were off then as well, because I would have performed so much better, just for anyone who happened to be watching. No, originally the Citizen Brain was commissioned by this really cool theater troupe in Berkeley, where I live, called the Shotgun Players. And it was, and the artistic director, Patrick Dooley, had said to me he wanted a show in his season that could lead into the 2020 presidential election and then also run after it no matter what happened. And he was still, as many of us were, still was PTSDing about the 2016 election,
right, when
they had the mistake of having a party at the theater to watch the election returns in 2016, which had turned, of course, into a wake.
Right.
And so I told him, I said, well, I'm a fellow at this brain place, which is, sort of amazing that it happened to me, who has never been good at science. And I've been learning all about the brain and about dementia. And I've come up with this theory that our American political system has dementia, and I'm doing a piece about it. And he said, oh, it sounds perfect. And so I started working on it as I do, and I develop all my stuff through improv. So I was doing these improvs, and it was set to open in the fall of 2020. And then
what could go wrong?
You'll never imagine, Colin, but it may have escaped your notice. But all these things happened in 2020. And so anyhow, and I just done a week of improvs in Berkeley, and just at the end of that day in March, and just at the end, they announced everything was shutting down. Everything was shutting down the whole season. So I ended up not being able to fully develop the show, and I did a version of it over Zoom from my living room, and it was sort of cool, being in close-up for like the entire time and stuff. But I'm really audience-driven and audience-motivated, and so I did that, and it was cool, and we did a few of those performances, but it wasn't like the real show. So then I got, after COVID eased, it's still going on, of course, but I got to work on it some more and really develop it finally into its finished version of it, which played in this past January in San Francisco at the Club Fugazi, which is a really beautiful theater. And so I did that. And the thing that was fortunate for me, maybe unfortunate for the rest of us, including me, is that it was still totally relevant, because when I was first doing this show, we were all dealing with this idea that Donald Trump might become president. That guy.
Yeah.
That guy might become president. And now here we are
dealing with whatever happened to him anyway.
Yeah, no. It's I don't know.
We can tie it to the election in a different way too, because this is very much begins with your mother and her late in life romance and marriage. And although Barack Obama was not a Marxist and Kamala Harris is not a communist, your mother was.
My mother absolutely was a communist to her last day, as was my father. And yes, as I tell this, it's really this beautiful love story where my mom, who had divorced my father when I was a baby, maybe it was something I said, I don't know. And then she'd had a number of boyfriends and stuff, but then she never fell in love until her late 70s, when, as I talk about in Citizen Brain, she answered an ad in the personal section of The Nation magazine saying, communist widower, mid-80s, seeks communist woman, 70 to 120 for hopefully long-term relationship.
They don't have C date like they have J date?
They should. No, I think.
How do communists, how are they going to find each other?
Colin, swipe left. There you have it. That's the name. That's what it should be called.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't be prouder. So, and so my mom, and it turns out, as I say the piece, he put out this call out into the nation readership for communist women, old communist women, to maybe become his new communist wife, and he was flooded with responses. Mm-hmm. It was at least in those days, if you were a communist widower, it was a seller's market. So he and my mom was the chosen one. He picked her. And she moved out from New York. She had never left New York. She moved out. He was Frank Rosen, this incredible, wonderful communist retired union organizer. And my mom moved out to Chicago. But then, as I talk about, in the fall of 2016, Frank, very sadly, after they'd had a few great years together, Frank was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And this whole crisis began that so many families face. And I was with my family in Berkeley and trying to figure out what to do. And at the same time, was just beginning this amazing, weird fellowship at the University of California, San Francisco's Memory and Aging Center as a brain fellow.
Yeah, I mean, this is great about this, too, because like everybody else who's there is, Nobel Prize eligible.
No, they're all. I know they have actually too many neurons. They're shedding neurons. Yeah. Whereas I just have 3, and I'm just like trying to make them all connect.
And so you're walking by an office, and they're like, I can talk to the MacArthur Genius Grant people later. Josh, come on in, let's talk.
It's like just talk to me about your communist childhood.
But the other thing that's one of the things that characterizes your work too, obviously it's very funny. It tends to be also very topical, but it's also, there's always kind of some warmth and tenderness running through the whole thing. And the description of your mother, who reminds me a lot of my mother, was somebody who was non-emotive, not particularly, she tells you, I don't want to step on too many of your lines from the show, but she does tell you at one point if there's a fire, she's going to take all of her books and records first and then come back for you.
Yeah, and that was a compliment.
Yeah.
That was, I was happy to be in the top 5. Yeah.
But,
and I was her only child.
Yeah. But she's like this, she's like that, and then at 70, she meets Frank, and all the lights just turn on. The lights of her emotions turn on in a way that they never have before.
And it was beautiful for me to see that she was capable of that, to see that she was capable of that warmth, because I'd never seen it before, ever, right? I mean, she always wanted, my mom, I don't talk about it in this piece specifically, but she felt that her own mother, my grandma Dora, who I remember, this kindly little Jewish lady who, the only person ever who thought I was too thin, trying to make me, to feed me. But that this was, to her, to my mom, a monster, she felt to her. And my mother had never gotten the love that she felt that she should have gotten as a child. So this love story is really beautiful. And then this wonderful man who I loved very much, Frank Rosen, my stepfather, he got Alzheimer's. But the other thing about this piece, and the thing that was very challenging in developing the piece for me, I even sort of talk about at the beginning, is that in my shows, I talk a lot about my communist dad. My communist dad was this, I talk about in my show, Red Diaper Baby, is this big guy with a big pot belly, running around the house naked, with talcum powder, puffing off of his private parts and waking me up by singing the Internationale. I mean, he was just bigger than life and just warm and open and a big hug and just all these things. My mom was, she just was, as you said, just sort of withholding and cool and things like that. And so for me, as I started to learn about empathy and the fact that there was an empathy circuit when I was at the Brain Institute, they discovered an empathy circuit in the brain. And I was thinking about empathy and how our country needs more empathy in our collective empathy circuit. But it also, at the same time, I was dealing with my mom and her struggles with her husband at the time. And it becomes also this challenge for me, this story about me figuring out how to have empathy and closeness with my mother, my own mother. And I always felt it was so, what's wrong with me? That I don't have this. I mean, that's the thing that people have. That's the thing that makes you human, is that you and your mom and you and your mom are close, and you dote and you dote on each other, and then she hugs in. So what's wrong with me? Why am I not why didn't she feel that way about me? Why haven't I been able to express my love to her in the way that I feel it? And so that becomes this huge challenge. So while I'm thinking, wow, we as citizens have this challenge of feeling compassion and empathy for our fellow citizens who think differently from us in some ways and feel differently, at the same time, it was so close to home. In fact, it couldn't have been closer, dealing with my mom and realizing, wait, I need to feel that with her and from her as well.
If it makes you feel any better. So my mother had Alzheimer's, and she also had not been an emotionally demonstrative person. And, I think you experienced with Frank, there's these moments where they realize something that they hadn't been thought of. So my son and I had taken her out for a day, and we'd been riding around. Apparently we'd been talking about religion and the Bible in the car, and we were in a little lunch place. And my mother suddenly realizes that she doesn't know where her car is. And she goes, "Where's my car?" And I said, "Well, I did take your car away a while ago." She said, "You took my car?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I cannot believe you took my car." And she kind of went on like this. And I said, "Well, just to return to what we were talking about before, I guess you could say that I'm the Judas of this story." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, if that's true, if I'm Judas, I'll eventually take my own life and burn in hell for all eternity." And she had a little pause and she went, "When?" So, we're all still like at the end of the cycle, still looking for things.
Damn, I wish I could steal that. It just doesn't fit in my own story.
Yeah, it doesn't work for your own story.
Yeah.
The other story that I had about her was that she had worked in a neurologist's office as a medical secretary. And so she practiced all the tests, like the backward sevens and stuff. And my father used to say, Barbara's goal is to get Alzheimer's and have nobody know it. That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. So the thing that you pair up against this or kind of line up against this, as you've already alluded to, there's what's going on in your family.
Yes.
And then there's what's going on in the nation.
Yes.
And meanwhile, you're at this brain institute and you're looking at all these images of the brain and you see these atrophies, I think they're called, these kind of spaces where neurons don't connect synaptically.
They can't make the leap. The communication is cut off. The atrophies cut off that communication in the brain. And as you're saying, I started my brain fellowship at this place called the Global Brain Health Institute. I started just as Trump was starting his presidency, and we just gone through the elections, and so I was so used to looking at that map of the states with the red states and the blue states. I'm just see those states, and I'm focused on them. And I was looking at this was my vision that really launched everything for me. My aha moment was I was looking at a brain scan, looking at these atrophies. And all of a sudden, I wasn't looking at a brain scan. I was looking at a political map of the United States, and I saw the same atrophies there. Only these were not between the different neurons in the brain. They were between what I started to think of as citizen neurons in a citizen brain, in a collective brain. And I thought, my God, we're working on, and God willing, there will soon be a cure for dementia and for Alzheimer's. But we also need a cure for this kind of dementia, this political dementia, that keeps us from being able to empathize with one another when we have so much more in common, as I believe I've been hearing from certain candidates. We have so much more in common than are different between us. And how can I, in my own little way as a storyteller, using brain science, how can I push this forward?
And so, and I don't want to preempt too much of it because people should go and see the show at Real Art Ways or wherever they get a chance to see it in the future. But what you do come up with, I'm being told this is the last question I can ask before the break, but what you do come up with the help of two brain scientists, particularly a woman in Virginia who I think has a Nobel Prize and a field medal or something, but she helps you out with this kind of idea. It's sort of radical empathy. I mean, that whoever is bothering you, whoever is troubling to you, it's kind of the cliche, right? Hurt people, that you have to ask yourself some questions about that. Why is this person that way? So explain where that gets you to.
Yeah. So her name is Dr. Virginia Sturm, and she is absolutely brilliant. And she taught me this little exercise that she had developed for strengthening your empathy circuit, since they had discovered that we have an empathy circuit. And the idea is, yes, when someone makes you angry, when someone's mean to you, says something or does something mean to you, that instead of responding, I'm a New Yorker, I'm just like, cut me off, holy moly, right? And instead, what you're supposed to do is take a deep breath, and if necessary, a second deep breath. And then you try to imagine why this person did that yucky thing to you. And Of course, usually you won't be able to figure out why, the person's gone by this point or whatever. But the point is that you do this work, this work of making this leap into the perspective of another person. And it turns out that each time you do that, which is practicing empathy, each time you do that, your empathy circuit gets stronger. So you're actually better able to empathize the more you empathize.
Yeah, it's a muscle. So, today as I was driving over here, I was under the spell of your work. And so a guy cut me off in traffic, and I followed him up, pulled up next to him, and I rolled my window down, and I said, "Who hurt you?"
See, that's so evolved.
Yeah, he just thought that was something else, I think. But
no, that would actually, if you had done that to me, I would have been somewhat frightened. But
all right, so we're going to grab a quick break. We're here with Josh Kornbluth, a monologuist or monologist, whatever. And we'll come back with more.
We shall not be just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be. Oh, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
Don't you know, they're talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, they're talking about a revolution, it sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time.
So we're back with Josh Kornbluth, who is going to be performing at Real Artways this weekend. Do we actually know it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday? That's what the weekend is, right?
It is in fact when I'm performing.
Right, and you should go to the realartways.org site and find out all the times and things like that. It's Citizen Brain. I haven't seen it. I've read the entire script. I love this show, and I want you to go see it. We should talk about a few other things, too, because I don't want to spoil too much of Citizen Brain for people. And also because I'm fascinated by one of your many projects in the pipeline here. And this one involves a science fiction writer ancestor. This really feels made up. I just want to say this feels like the work of a very creative mind coming up with this really fascinating scenario, except that it's completely true. So tell us about Cyril Kornbluth.
Yeah, so Cyril M. Kornbluth was my father's cousin, and I never got to meet him because he was waiting for a commuter train in 1958, the year before I was born, and he died of a heart attack. And up till then, he was just 34, and he was a great science fiction writer. He was like an amazing science fiction writer, won Hugo Awards, things like that. And he had started writing science fiction as a teenager in where I grew up in New York, in Washington Heights, in Manhattan. And he had been in all these magazines. He used all these pseudonyms, and he was in this group called the Futurians, which also included Isaac Asimov and stuff. There were all these like brilliant young sci-fi people. So that was Cyril. And it always bummed me out. It still bums me out that I never got to meet him because, he was this brilliant science fiction writer. I really liked science fiction. And then very tragically, he died at 34. And so I have this friend, Jonathan Lethem, who is a great, great writer. He wrote Motherless Brooklyn and The Fortress of Solitude, and he's a really great novelist. And I met him years ago. He came to my show, and we got to know each other. And he told me at some point that he loved Cyril Kornbluth. By the way, Cyril M. Kornbluth was is CM Kornbluth.
CM, yeah.
CM. But the M, he didn't have a middle initial.
Right.
And it's part of his many mysteries of Cyril is what the M stood for. Maybe it stood for Mary, who was his wife's name. We don't know.
Well, there's a couple other things. First of all, I want to say that I've been obsessed for pretty much my whole life with a semi-obscure science fiction writer named R.A. Lafferty. So maybe it's like a science fiction thing.
It might be.
But
Because he
also-
liked CM Kornbluth was his preferred byline.
Although he also used Cecil Corwin, S.D. Gottsman, Edward J. Bellin. I could go on and on.
He had so many.
Yeah. My favorite is Paul Dennis Levand. And I was thinking...
That's bespoke.
He really sat down and thought about that one. It's like Paul Dennis Levand. I like that.
I don't know if that was the one, but I read somewhere that one of his pseudonyms was the name of a particularly hated high school teacher. He also, by the way, was at school with Henry Kissinger. Just so you know that everyone who went there ended up doing really great things in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing to apologize for in that class anyway.
Yeah. So Jonathan tells me that he loves Cyril Kornbluth, and then he says, I got this idea, Josh, that what if we made this movie? That he hadn't made any movies, Jonathan hadn't, and I'd made maybe one or two. I'd made I think both of them with my brother, and so he said, what if we made this movie? It was sort of be half like trying to figure out stuff about this mysterious Cyril Kornbluth. But this other one, oh, by the way, just fun fact, never brushed his teeth, Cyril Kornbluth. His teeth were green, according to all accounts, and so he covered his mouth with his hand when he talked and stuff like that. So it's just something just for the visual, for the listener.
Yeah.
So
kids, don't do that, all right? Brush your teeth.
brush your teeth. You don't want to end up as a really great science fiction writer.
Right.
No.
Or dead at a very young age.
Or,
too,
yeah.
And there are some lessons here.
There are pluses and minuses. Maybe just flaws. I don't know.
Think of all the time he saved. Anyway.
Yeah, talk to your parents about it. But and he said, I want to do it because he loves Cyril Kornbluth. He said, maybe I want to do like a movie that's sort of this weird hybrid. Is like half of it's about Cyril's life, but the other half would be based on one of his stories, and probably it would be based on his most famous story, which is called The Marching Morons. In The Marching Morons, a guy named Honest...
Ripped from today's headlines.
Yeah, sadly. And in The Marching Morons, Honest John Barlow, who is he's a realtor and also a con man, he goes to the dentist, which was clearly a sore spot for Cyril. He goes to the dentist, gets a new kind of anesthesia, and it goes wrong, and he goes into a state of suspended animation for centuries.
Yeah.
During that time, at one point, the story tells us he was used. His body was used as the mascot for the University of Chicago football team. But then eventually he is discovered and awakened way in the future, centuries into the future, into this world that is run by, not to put too fine a point on it, stupid people who are most everybody, but they have enslaved a few smart people because they need them to do stuff for them.
Yeah, 5 billion idiots and a few million geniuses. Right.
Yeah. Which
sprinkling of geniuses.
Yes, a smattering. Yeah. A soupçon of geniuses. And so anyhow, so that's the story, and then things progress in different ways that are funny and weird because he was a great writer. And so Jonathan had this idea that we would somehow mix the two together, Jonathan Lethem, my friend. And then while we were talking about it, Idiocracy, the movie, came out. And he goes, wait, it's the same plot. Yeah. We can't do it. So then cut to like 15 or 20 years later, which is like earlier this year. This is just a few months ago. And I'm sitting around and I'm just thinking, I've sort of lost track. I haven't been in touch with Jonathan Lethem. He's become super famous as a novelist, which he should be because he's awesome. And my email doesn't work for him. And I just think, that would be really cool to ask him about that movie again. It's been a while. Idiocracy. Maybe we could do something now. And so I just decide, because I know where he's teaching at this college, I just make up an email for him at thecollege.edu and thinking it'll bounce back and that'll be the end of it. But instead, he writes back to me and he goes, this has been haunting me, Josh. I really want to make this movie still. This is like 18, 20 years later. And so...
And Idiocracy is no longer relevant at all,
No, it's about a world that's run... It's about a world that's run by stupid people. Like, what? That doesn't make any... That has no relevance to our life now. So, as you say. So he comes to Berkeley to give a reading and then comes back and we talk and stuff. And he goes, this is a crazy idea. And therefore, I think his words were in the email to me, because, I've looked at it several times from Jonathan, is like, Josh, this is an impossible project, and therefore I want to do it. So, and we have no budget, we have no anything.
Yeah. You do have Schwarzenegger has committed to the project. He's
been brought on.
Yeah.
He's going to have to slender down for this, and also look even more Jewish than he looks now, which is hard to imagine. But the accent,
he listens to this show. I just want to.
The accent could work as Yiddish. It could. Yeah.
I just want to say also, I'm fascinated with Cyril now. I did note that one of his titles is something that Frank could have written, Stepsons of Mars.
Yeah. He wrote just tons of things. Another great story of his was called The Little Black Bag, which was actually about, it also touches on that future world in which, because the not smart people want to play doctor, they've gotten the smart people to make them doctors' bags with equipment in it that it's sort of like Star Trek now, like you can just touch people and the tumor goes away. And accidentally in this future time, that black bag goes into a time machine, and it goes back in time where it's found in the present by this guy who he used to be a doctor, and now he's just drinking a lot, and his career ends in scandal, and he finds this black bag with these miraculous medical doodads in it, and he becomes really famous. So anyhow, that's another.
So that's the Mehmet Oz story, basically.
Yes, except I think that guy would have been a better candidate. Yeah. I really do. I think he would have been more natural. But in any case, just a great writer and a great story. And so this is the basic idea. As far as we know just now, we're about to do our first shoot when I go back to Berkeley after this gig, and I do a few more gigs. We're going to do our first shoot on October 19th, just in case people are around Oakland and want to come to the shoot. But the idea is this, and it's brilliant, it's Jonathan's idea, is that I, Josh Kornbluth, will play my father's late cousin, Cyril Kornbluth. And what happened is that Cyril Kornbluth did not die in 1958. He went into a state of suspended animation and just was awoken now in the present 2024. I play him, and now I want to find out what happened. Here I am, Cyril Kornbluth, having gone into a state of suspended animation for over a half century. Cyril fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Like my father, he was fought in World War II. I mean, he fought fascism. He was just sort of, I guess, maybe somewhat coming up, but in the McCarthy period. He's going, well, that stuff must have all been resolved. Fascism must be over. And now he sort of wakes up, and here he is in America in 2024, and he wants to find out what's going on. So I, playing Cyril, will interview actual public intellectuals of various political stripes and say, well, what's going on? Explain it to me. And some other things will happen, which I'm sure Jonathan will explain to me at some point. But I'm really excited.
Have public intellectuals committed to this project yet?
They will. They just don't know it yet.
They'll hear this.
But the first person that we are interviewing is the one person that we're aware of who was an actual friend of Cyril's, who's a bit younger than him, who is still alive. His name is Robert Silverberg. And he is himself a great science fiction writer and editor. And I as Cyril, in a couple weeks, I'm going to go interview Robert Silverberg, who knew Cyril, and ask him what's going on in this world. And Robert, who's this really cool guy, we both went to downtown Berkeley. Why? Just to give you a little context here. He's really emotional about it because, he's in his 90s, Robert himself, and Cyril, he looked up to Cyril. He's a bit younger. He looked up to him as this great science fiction writer who was at the peak of his powers, who had fought in World War II, had 2 kids, and then suddenly was lost to us. And so he wrote in his email just a couple days ago, I think it's okay to quote an email from some third person without, but Robert just said, this is, it's going to be something for me to talk to this, my friend who I haven't seen in so long.
Well, I think you're doing the right thing too. You start at the end of the age spectrum so you can catch people. I mean, Chomsky, I would get him next.
I would get Chomsky. God, I would love to.
I know his cousin Marty Chomsky. I can probably help you out with that.
Can you really? Yeah. Honestly, Colin, if you could hook me up with Chomsky, yeah.
I interviewed Chomsky on stage one time, and we were 45 minutes in before he knew there was another person there. He was just kind of, oh, that's you. You're sitting there. There were noises coming into my head, that were interfering with my thought process.
No, he's one of those people who I just feel like I might not be as smart as him. He might know that,
right.
but man,
One thing about him is you can bring stuff up
still
and
love
like
him.
out of nowhere, and he will be ready to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
He's one of those people. So you've already got the one Oscar from Haiku Tunnel.
Yeah, no, they did. It's still in the mail, I'm told.
Yeah. But also Will Smith slapped you. I mean, we know the whole story.
I feel like I deserved it, frankly. I should not have made that joke on the stage at the Oscars. It was gratuitous, frankly, and it wasn't worthy. It wasn't worthy of the occasion.
Blaming yourself is the wrong thing.
No.
All right, what we're going to do, first of all, we're excited about this. We don't have like a really release date for you yet. Do we have a title?
No, we don't have a title or a release date or a budget.
Right. Catering? Do we have catering yet?
We're going to have, because our producer is from Brazil, we're going to have catering. I have yet to meet anyone from Brazil who is not an excellent host.
A lot of roasted meats and stuff like that.
Alex Da Silva knows how to treat the crew.
All right, we're going to take a break right now. I can hear music telling me we're going to take a break, and we will come back.
There can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
We are back. We want to thank the maestro, Dylan Reyes. He's our technical producer. Jonathan McNichol, Jonathan McPants, whatever you want to call him. He's the producer of this particular episode. With me is Josh Kornbluth, the monologuist, and he is going to do Citizen Brain at Real Artways this weekend. You do not want to miss this. And there's famous people. I'm not going to say any names. One of them might rhyme with Mavid Metalstein, but there's going to be famous people coming to watch this. So sit there with the celebrities and have a great time. So already on social media, a lot of people are saying nothing about oboe reads at all. They're upset.
It's a cancellation, really. It's part of the cancel culture and how its focus has always been on double reed players.
Right. And I didn't want to do it because everybody asks you about the oboe reeds.
No, people come up to me on the street.
Yeah.
And frankly, it gets tiresome.
I don't want to recap the 60 Minutes interview or Seth Meyers or anything. They took you there, but this is an interesting thing. So you are a musical person, and you are a serious and semi-lifelong oboe player, although I think it's worth mentioning your mother and the violin and all that stuff.
Yes. So I started on the violin, as so many of us do. And my mother, while I was practicing, again, we spoke about how she wasn't necessarily the most nurturing.
Yeah. Not a hugger.
Not a hugger. So for example, I would be practicing the violin, and my mom would come running into my room with her hands pressed to her ears and yell, squeak, 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 as I was playing. It didn't give me confidence, Colin. It didn't. And then,
Yasha Heifetz's mother did the same thing. I just want to say that.
And he overcame it,
Yeah.
right? So what am I? Why am I looking for pity? I should have pushed through. But actually, what happened was I was coming back from a friend's place
I love this.
with all my instruments and including my violin, and I got out of the taxi cab, and then the taxi cab went away, which is a bad idea. At least it was in Washington Heights, and a group of youths came up to me, and one literally held a knife to my throat. I was, I don't know, I was in third grade, maybe second, third grade. It held a knife to my throat and said, give us your violin. Give us your violin or I'll slit your throat, right? I mean, it's a Jack Benny setup.
Right.
I'm thinking. All right. So, but if only I could have played violin as well as Jack Benny. And now I'm really appealing to the youthful audience that everyone,
absolutely.
the youthful listeners, and Jack Benny, everyone.
I just also want to say, shortly after mugging Josh, Marty Chomsky straightened out his whole life. He never did anything like that again.
No, he saw the error of his ways. He said, "You know what I am? I'm lumpen. I'm a lumpen. I got to be with the working class. I got to turn myself around."
So you go. So you don't get the you got everything.
So then I go. So then they don't get the violin, and everyone's relieved.
Yeah.
They don't find the violin. They actually caught the perpetrators, but the violin had already gone through a middleman.
Right.
It was being played by some young Stradivarian.
Your mother said to the cops, "Sometimes you lose things in the evidence room, don't you?" I think I saw that on TV.
Can I slip you $5? And so my mother said, "Okay, so you have to play an instrument because you're like a middle-class Jewish kid. But how about, let's say we don't pick up the violin again, Josh. Would you pick," and this is where the joke was on her because I picked the oboe, but she said, what would you like to play? It has to be an orchestral instrument. And I said, what is the most difficult instrument in the orchestra? And she said, I think it's the oboe. And I said, what's the most obscure one? What's the least played? She said, I think it's the oboe. So I said, I'll do the oboe. Also, I think it's from Peter and the Wolf, which I listened to a lot with Leonard Bernstein. And with the great Harold Gomberg, first oboist of the New York Philharmonic at that time, playing oboe. The oboe was the duck.
Yeah.
And I liked feeding the ducks with my grandpa Julius in Central Park. So I picked the oboe, and I started playing it. And then the thing that I learned that I did not know was that after a certain grace period, when your teacher usually will make your reads, that oboists have to make their own reads.
Right.
The other
thing that I would have told you, because I played in a lot of not oboe, but I played a lot of youth orchestras and bands and stuff. As an elementary school student, the oboe player was always either in tears or about to go into tears because the reed was so.
The reed is terrible because
it's
that's the thing. First of all, is that it's a double reed, right? So it has to vibrate against itself. But enough about my sex life. So, no, that was supposed to be, yeah. But you have to. It's really hard to make. It's really hard to make, and you make it from it's sort of like these. It's almost I don't know, like a kind of grass or something or whatever, like a weed. It's a kind of reed, but you scrape it. You have to tie it. But then once you make it. This is the thing. For a good oboist, for a professional oboist, 1 out of maybe 20 reeds works well. Mm-hmm. That's for a good one, like someone who's good, right? And then when you start playing it, as soon as you start playing it, the various chemicals in your saliva start to break it down.
Right.
They break down the integrity of the reed, so that therefore it dies within a few hours of use. So it's nuts, and you're constantly making reeds, and they're constantly dying on you.
It's a parable about the futility of human existence. Is what you're saying.
It's totally yeah. It's like you wish you just had to roll a rock up a mountain, and and so and. But it's a lovely instrument. The other thing that's traumatic about it, I was the oboist in the Youth Symphony Orchestra of New York, is that the oboe tunes the orchestra. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this still happens now with electric tunes, but the oboe tunes. Well, no, they had pitch. They had tuning forks. They could have done it, but the oboe, because it's sort of piercing. Yeah. Right. So the oboe tunes the orchestra, except that. My embouchure, where it's the lips muscles that hold it, it wasn't so great. And so my intonation was not great. And so, which is appropriate as we approach the Day of Atonement, by the way, Colin. Yes. Right. So my intonation wasn't great. So you tune each section of the orchestra one by one, right? First violin, second violins, the brass, etc. And my A would change with each one. So which
kind of defeats the purpose.
And they hated me. I mean, they hated me.
They eventually brought in an actual duck to do it instead.
Actual duck was much more on that A440. But, and so, you'd play, we'd be playing a Brahms as an orchestra because of my tuning of the orchestra. It sounded like a Schoenberg more. It was like it was more, it was more avant-garde, you would say.
So I have to go back to that ratio of 1 out of every 20, and that's if you're good at it.
If you're good at it.
So what are your numbers like?
My numbers are like 1 out of infinity. I have an oboe gig coming up. For those people who might find themselves in Berkeley, California on October 13th, by the way, I will be doing my first gig with an orchestra since I was a teenager at the Ashkenaz Club. This is a real promotion. You can be Sephardic to go. It's
okay.
It's not closed off.
It's not restricted.
It's not restricted. You can go. But I'm playing with, and this is the actual name of the orchestra. It's the Really Terrible String Orchestra. It's called the Really. They contacted me and say, Josh, I'm playing for the Really Terrible String Orchestra. We would like you to play Bach's oboe and violin concerto with us. And I thought, finally, a musical organization in which I have found my level. I do not feel like I'm going to bring them down.
That's still, well, I mean, I actually watched a video of you playing, and I mean, you're sort of making fun of yourself, but this is obviously something, well, you stuck with it for a really long time.
I kept my oboe.
And you've also submitted yourself to this incredibly punishing regimen of making reeds. This is really important to you at some level.
It is. And also the practicing. There's a thing also about the oboe. I speculate about this in one of my other shows, but because there's so much pressure, the oboe, the aperture is very tiny of the reed. It's just this little hole, space between the two blades. And so basically all this pressure builds up in your head because you cannot. I actually had this at music camp. My oboe teacher said, if you were to blow out all the air that you had in your lungs all the way out through the reed and the oboe, by that point you would be dead. I also want to mention that he had a drug problem, but it was, and I don't think he should have been as harsh as he was, but it's true. You build up this pressure in your head, and Colin, I actually have this theory. There aren't that many record stores anymore, but if you go to a record store and you line up, just take any oboist, and we all have our favorite oboists. Yeah. Say Heinz Holliger, whoever. You line them up. I hate Heinz Holliger, but you line them up. Take one oboist and take like his career. Line up records of his and look at the record covers or CD covers through the years. You will see his head get larger. You will see his head. Bring a caliper, and you will see his head. And it's from the pressure that backs up through. I mean, one hat fits all. One size fits all. Baseball caps do not fit me anymore, Colin.
Well, that's why they have the adjustable band for the oboe players.
Yeah,
it's like if you're putting on weight, you let out a notch.
Yeah, that's right.
You do that with the hat, too.
No, but oboist, you let out your hat. You go, I just got to lean back here. I've been playing so long.
Oh, that fried scungili. Oh. Went right to my head.
I tell you, that Mozart in C. It blew me out, man.
All right. Delightful though this is, we have to begin wrapping it up. So first of all, we have to once again remind people why it is that you're in my studio in Hartford right now, and that is because of Real Artways. You are going to be performing Citizen Brain there this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can check the Real Artways. We should know the times of the performances, but we just don't do it.
I think I do.
Okay.
I plan to start telling my stories. Oh, God, someone correct me here.
Winnie's going to come rushing in here in about 5 seconds.
Yes. But I think, Winnie, if I'm right, I think it is at Friday at 7, Saturday at 7, and Sunday at 2:30. Someone tell me if that's wrong.
I'm going to say it's right.
Yeah.
But I'm not getting any information on the Slide.
But you know what you want to do is just show up at Real Artways at dawn.
Yes.
At the break of dawn. What's
because
keeping you?
people will be camping out.
Kornbluth mania.
Yeah.
Once you've caught it.
A lot of camaraderie builds up in the line while they're waiting.
And you'll tell the oboist because they'll be having those outsized heads.
All right, Josh Kornbluth, thanks. It's so great to see you again, hear your voice again, and looking forward to this weekend. We're going to say goodbye for now, but we're going to come back and do another show unless someone stops us.
I manage my fantasy baseball team better than I manage my anger these days. And I'd trade my best pitcher for a draft pick and a picture of the president writhing in pain. And he'll die like we all die in pain or sleep, and we'll still have our fantasy baseball. So I'm putting in love now, I'm putting in faith, putting fear on a long-term IL. I'm going outside, I'm gonna help organize something better, something beautiful.